Hi everyone. Today video is on .NET 6 Razor Pages CRUD operation with entity framework. CRUD means create, read, update, delete operations. So what is Razor page? A Razor page is a simplified web application model. On comparing with MVC template, Razor pages won't have controller, which means Razor page is a combination of view is a HTML page and the model. So routing itself can be configured within the pages or view. So a Razor page mostly contains two files or a single file. Either we can entirely develop application in single file like .cs HTML means within the Razor syntax we can also write the C# code, or else we can split them to maintainability for maintainability like .cs HTML for Razor syntax and .cs HTML.cs file for C# code. Okay, so here is a sample SQL create table query. So I am going to use this table to apply all CRUD operations from my Razor page. So now let's create a .NET 6 Razor page application. So here is my .NET CLI command for creating a Razor project. Okay, the command is .NET space new space web app space -o space your project name. Okay, let me create my project. Now you can see here project is successfully created. I am going to open my project in Visual Studio Code Editor. And here is my project, and we can look at here like target framework is 6.0, which is our main agenda to create a .NET 6 Razor page application. Now, before jumping into creating CRUD operation, let's walk through the project. So, first thing we have to look into is program.cs file. So, in any .NET 6 application, program.cs file is a entry file. So it consists of services registration and the middleware configurations. So services registration means registering the any service into the DI service means dependency injection service so that we can inject any of the service into our logic very easily. Okay. Here you can observe one service is registered, that is add Razor pages. This will inject the Razor pages into the our application. Okay, and here you can observe all the middlewares by default configured on creating the project. So if you observe here, there is a development page showing for only for the production like exception page, and another middleware is like HTTPS redirection. So this middleware, if any request comes in a non-HTTP way, it will redirect them to HTTPS. So use static files is to deliver the static files like JSS, JS, images, CSS files. Okay, it won't allow the any static file request beyond this middleware. Here itself, all the static files will be delivered, and use routing will configure the route table here. So authorization for enabling the authentication user process. So here you can observe map Razor pages middleware that will enable the routing for our Razor pages. Okay, that's all about program.cs file. And we can go to the pages folder and you can observe here, like we have index.cs HTML page that contains all HTML and Razor syntax. And there is another file with same name but ends with .cs extension like index.cs HTML.cs file. So in this file is called model. We have already learned like Razor pages made up of two files like HTML and model, right? So this is the model page and this is the HTML page. Okay. So all the C# logic like fetching or any calculations can be carried out in our model class. So like this, we can create every file with .cs extension to represent a model for a Razor page. Okay, and shared folder contains master layout and some partial views. And www root folder is for storing the static files like CSS, JSS, images, or any GIF icon, etc. So that's all about the structure of the Razor pages by default. So to communicate with the database from our Razor Page application, we need a library. That library is nothing but NT Framework Core, which is a Microsoft developed library for communication with the databases. Okay, so since I am using .NET CLI command, I am going to copy this command. If you are using Visual Studio, you can run this package manager command. Now let's install the NT Framework Core package. Since our database is SQL Server, there is a extension library for NT Framework, that is NT Framework Core.SQL Server. We need to install that package as well. So let's install the NT Framework Core.SQL Server. So let's install. So those are the required NuGet packages from the NT Framework Core. Now what we can do means we have to implement the database logic to establish the communication with our C# code to SQL Server. So in our demo, the approach we are going to use is code first with existing database. Means I have already created a table into my SQL Server. So it is a existing database. And I am going to consume by creating C# classes in my project. So this approach is called code first with existing database. So let's add a folder like data. Inside of it, add another folder like entities. So in this folder, we are going to add all our t-shirt classes that represent tables. Representing tables means a class is equivalent to table and table columns are equivalent to class properties. Okay. So let me create my table class. So cake.cs is my table class. So this is my table class. Let's add properties into it. So finally, our table class look like this, and these properties are equivalent to columns in the database. So the property name should match with the column name. Now we have to create one more class that is equivalent to data SQL database. So that class is called database context. So inside of data folder, let me create a class like my old db context.cs file. So naming convention for a database context is its name should be equals to the name of the SQL Server database. So here is our my old db context class. Till now it is a plain C# class. To make it a database context class, it should inherit db context. So where the db context comes from? That comes from Microsoft.NT Framework Core. Okay, let's import it. Now let's add a constructor. So in the constructor, we are passing some options, and those options are passing to base class nothing but DB context. So what are these options? These options are nothing but like connection string and connection string timeout, like those configurations. So these configurations we are going to set up in program.cs file in upcoming step. So all these options will be dynamically injected into the constructor once we consume our DB context class. Now we have to register our table classes into our DB context class so that our DB context have control over the respective tables in the SQL server. So to register a table class, the type of the table class must be encapsulated with the DB set, and this name of the property should match with the name of the table by convention. Now in app_settings.json file, let me add my database connection string. So app_settings.development.json file is for development mode. So since our local is a development environment, right? So I can add here my development database connection string. So let's add the connection string here. So added the connection string. Now go to program.cs file, and here we have to register our my DB context as a service registration so that my DB context can be injected anywhere into our application. Add DB context, and type should be our DB context class name. So this is SQL Server option comes from Microsoft Entity Framework code. To that we have to pass our connection string. So to read the connection string, builder dot configuration dot get connection string. Inside of it, let's pass our connection string property name. That's the end of the story of configuring database context into our application. Now, database context is ready to communicate with the database. Now we have to create our razor page logic for implementing the CRUD operation. So as an initial step, I want to do read operation first. Since I have already had some dummy data into my database, so I am going to retrieve that data and display on Razor pages. Here, one small correction, data folder is added inside of the pages. Let's move it up. Okay. Data folder also is on the top hierarchy folder. It should not be in the pages. Please correct it. Now, inside of the pages, let me create a folder like X. Now I am going to create two files. Like one is for view file, another is for model file. So I am going to name them like index.cshtml, which is a view file or a razor file. And I have to create one more file like index dot with same name html.cs. So this is our plain C# class. To make it as a razor page model, we have to inherit page model that comes from Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.MVC.Razor pages. Import it. Now let's inject the our DB context into our model. Razor pages model contains two entry methods like So these are the two entry methods. So on get async method gets executed for HTTP get request. Okay. And on post async executed for HTTP post request. And these method naming convention should follow as like this only. On get async and on post async. Okay. And if you want to customize, you have to specify your name inside of it. So on get is a mandatory prefix and async is a optional postfix. Similarly, for get also, if you want to give a custom name for your entry method, onPost is a mandatory prefix and your custom name, and async is a optional one. But customizing the entry method is not recommended because whatever the name here you specify, that should be given for given in the route as well. Okay, route means in the as a query parameters, which is very hard for maintaining. So it is always recommended to use default naming conventions. So for my read method, I no need to have onPost async method. So let me delete it. Now, whatever logic like fetching data from the database or any custom logic that I want to prepare, I can do it inside of the onGetAsync entry method. So let's read all the data from the database. Okay, we are going to follow a synchronous approach in this demo. Okay, toolist texting fetches all the data from the table like cake. Okay, now we are getting all the data from the database. Now I want to display them on the pages. So to display them on the pages, we have to create a public property of type of our table. Okay, now store the database values into this property. And finally, you can return like method like page that represents nothing but it should be pointing to index.cshtml. Now, in the index.cshtml, first we have to configure the route. So to configure the route, we can use page attribute. And the route must be starts with slash. Now we have to map our model here by registering as a model. Let me add some bootstrap code to display my content. So this is my sample bootstrap HTML. Let's loop my data and bind it here. So for looping data, I can add for each here. Okay. And I can get from model dot all, sorry, pages cake slash index dot model. Okay. Please correct the model path. And now we can see our property is accessible. Now at this entire div and place it inside of the for each loop. Now let's bind the data to this card like item.name, item.price. One small correction is that this is not decimal, this is description. Sorry for that. and item dot description. Okay, now we are done with our reading logic. Let's run the application and test it. Application is open. Now navigate to our route like cake slash home. And here you can observe our data is rendered like cards, right? Next operation we are going to focus is on create. Okay, so for create, let's create new pages for it. Inside of cakes folder, let's create pages like create.cshtml, create.cshtml.cs file. Okay, this is my create model. As a first step, let's inject the DB context. So for this create page, we are going to require both HTTP GET and POST entry methods. So let's define them. So here we just define our entry methods like onGetAsync and onPostAsync. So first let's focus on onGetAsync method logic. So onGetAsync executed for HTTP GET request. So it should load some form HTML. So there is no logic inside of it. So this line of code is enough for onGetAsync. But we have to create a one form binding model because we have to read the form data, right? For that, we have to create a form model. Okay, so let's create a model like folder like VMs. Inside of create a class like cakevm.cs. So our VM looks exactly like our NT model. So what is VM? VM is a view model or a replica class for our table class. Okay. If you want, you can use directly table class into our HTML, but is HTML form, but that is not recommended. That is why we have to create the view model. Now go to our create model. Here define our view model. So by default, it cannot store the form entered data. So to read the data from the form, it should be decorated with bind property. Now it has capability to read the data from the form. Now let's define route for our create.cshtml using page directive. Let's map the model as well. Now let's add some bootstrap form model. So this is my sample form for creating the cake. So here we have to observe the form tag must add attribute like method post. Okay, and button should be type should be submit. so that the form will be posted to the server. Okay. Now we have to enable the model binding for our form. To do that, we can use a razor attribute like ASP for. To that ASP for, I can use like cake form dot name. Okay, ASP for cake form dot price. ASP for cake form dot description. Okay, so that is our form. Now we have to add a logic for creating the new record into the database. So that logic must be added inside of the on post async. So here what I can do, enter equal to my old db context dot cakes dot add new cake. Okay. So here I am adding a new cake to my context and entry dot current values dot set values, and I can pass. See. So it will be used like a mapping. So what we are doing, I am adding an object to the context. So now here I am updating the values to that newly added object by using entry dot current values dot set values. Set values, what it will do here, cake VM and cake are different model, right? But set values has capability to read all the matching values from cake form to cake object. Okay, that is the beauty of these set values. We no need to explicitly map from cake form to cake. Okay, and finally I can save my changes to database, so new record will be added. Okay, after successful adding, we no need to show the form again. We have to show our index page so that we can observe the newly added record. For that we can do redirect and specify the path. Okay, so if you observe index.html in cake, what is its full path? Cake slash home, right? But in here we are only specifying cake. That is because it is already under the cake path, right? It can framework can understand whom should be append after the cake path. Okay. Now let's run and test the create operation. Let's navigate to cake slash create. So we can observe here a new form, right? So let me add a new item. So if I hit on submit, it's going to execute on post async logic. Okay. That is because submit is a HTTP post request. And you can observe here our newly added record is displaying on our read operation page, which is nothing but a index page. So we are directly navigating to create page, right? Let's add a button on home page so that we can navigate from here. To do that, go to inside of cakes folder index.cs HTML file. Let's add one more row. Here let's add a anchor tag, and here we can use ASP page attribute. Since it is already we know it is inside of the cake, so remaining path specifying is enough, that is create. Okay. I'm going to apply button styles to this anchor tag. Let's run and test the output. Okay, here you can see the button. If I click on this button, we are navigating to create page. So that's the end of the create operation. Now let's focus on update operation. Create new pages like and okay, this is my update model. To make it more quick, we can utilize the create model logic into our update model. So let's copy logic from create model into our update model. So let's import the namespaces and change the constructor name and get rid of this post logic. So entry methods get and post are required by update model as well. Okay. So here we have injected context and we have form update also depends on form, right? So we have a form type like cakevm and we have decorated with the bind property. Okay, first let's focus on the on get async. So in create async, get async is completely empty. But here we have a logic like we should have a logic like fetching a specified record from the database, right? On get on get async method will have a query parameter like ID. So this ID is nothing but to identify a record that we want to edit. I can use cake form equal to cake dot where id equal to id, and I am going to select all the data into my KQM model type. So I directly map the data into the KQM using the select method. And first at default async, that means it's the matched first record. So we are dumping our record into our cake form model. So if at all we get no data, then we are requested for a invalid record to update. In that case, we can return not found or else return page. Return page nothing but it maps to our update HTML page. Okay, now let's define route and define model. Let's copy the form from the create HTML. So copy this and paste it over here. I can specify like update a cake. That's it. As it is, same form can be used here. So here also we can use query property int ID because on form post URL contains already in the get request we are already having ID, right? So on form post also that ID will be stay, but the request will be HTTP post. So we will get ID in post as well. So now what we can do, first let's fetch the data or record that to be updated from the database. And now egg dot update equal to null if the record is not found. Okay, then return not found. or else we have to update our data here. So cake to update description equal to cake form dot description, cake to update name equal to cake form dot name. We are replacing the data of the record that is fetched from the database. Since we changed the state of the record that fetched from the database, if we simply call my database.save changes, all the database changes will be updated to data. Okay, so that is our logic. So let's run and test it. So before testing, we have to add a edit button in our home page. Copy as it is this line of code and paste it under paragraph, and here change the route to update. Okay, and we have to pass a query parameter, right? For that we have a rather syntax like ASP route hyphen ID. So this will be the query parameter key. Okay, at the rate item dot ID. Now test it, and also change the label like edit. Okay, now we got edit button. If I click on edit, so let me update the newly created record like butterfly. I want to change the name to butterfly cake to bunny cake, and I want to update the bunny shape cake, and I want to update price to something else. Now if I click on submit, my data should be updated. Here is the small mistake I have to correct. After updating also, I have to redirect back to my home page. Let's edit bunny cake. Previously it is updated successfully, but let's try to update again. Bunny sweet cake. Click on submit. See, bunny sweet cake. Update operation also completed successfully. Our final pending operation is delete operation. Let's create files for delete operation. So this is our delete model. Let's inject our DB context into the constructor. Now let's create a on get async entry method. And this method will have query parameter like ID to define the record that need to be deleted. So here, let's first fetch the record that we want to delete so that we can display on the HTML to show as a confirm message whether to delete or not. First, take start first the default async ID. Okay, we have to display the content in the HTML, right? So let's create a property. So let's assign our data to this property so that we can bind it to the UI. And if cake value is empty, means we are trying to delete the invalid record. In that case, we simply return not found. Or else we will display the page. That means we are going to render the HTML page. Okay. Now let's define route for our delete page. Now define model. Now let's add a small card. Okay. Bootstrap card to display our item that we are going to delete. So for that, what we will do, we will copy the card from the index.home page. Okay. And let's do some cleaning. And here we won't have loop of data, only single record. Okay, and here we can bind like model.cake. Okay. So we are binding the record that we have to delete. Now we have to add a delete confirmation button. Okay. Let's change it to, let's add a button inside of a form because we want to post it, right? So form and method like post and add a button. Okay. And add some stylings. Okay. And it type should be submit. Submit means it will post the form. Okay. So this will invoke the HTTP post request. So let's define the HTTP post in our delete model. Okay. Make it quick. Post. Okay. And async. Async. Okay. Anyway, we will have a ID. And here instead of binding to it, where record to delete. Okay. If it is not found, then we return not found response. If it is found, then what we have to do means we will remove it from the context and then we will call save changes. That will delete the record from the database. Okay, once deleted, we want to go to our home page. So redirect home. Here small correction. I am checking for wrong record. Here we have to check for record to delete. Okay. And now let's run the application and test the delete operation. So here we can see the delete button. If I click on it, we can see a confirmation page, delete confirmation page. If we click on confirm delete, our pineapple cake will be removed from the database. Okay. See, now we have only 3 records. That means our delete operation is successful. So that's all about the .NET 6 Razor Pages CRUD operation. I hope this video had delivered some useful information to you all. If you like the video, please support me by subscribing to my channel. Soon we are going to meet with a new video. Until then,